believing that suddenly allowed me to, and I've said it on here, had allowed me to just travel this journey without stress and anxiety and depression and all those things, because suddenly you realize probably I'm exactly where I need to be when I need to be.
Welcome to Reddle's Pub, where spirituality is explored without the baggage of religion, and truth is something we chase with drink in hand. We talk science, the supernatural, and the big questions about the world around us. Always open to new ideas and perspectives. Our goal? To find understanding in the unexplainable and have some interesting conversations along the way. No dogma, no boundaries, just a couple of seekers and some interesting guests digging into the uncharted territory of the unknown. Grab a drink, sit back, and join us.
I think that's interesting. It kind of ties back to earlier part of the conversation on, I was so dead set of like anything that kind of feels, tastes, smells, any of it, right? Like fundamentalism, I don't want nothing to do with it. And we said this earlier on the podcast, and I'll, kind of reiterate it back to, I do believe that it is interesting to use those gifts, so to speak, or those talents or whatever they are in the space that you are in. And I think that's important, is to figure that out. And I like that, it seems like kind of a constant theme of our conversation today is like, what do you do with that? And what do you do with it outside of that fundamentalism or Pentecostalism or even Christianity? What do you do with that space that you feel like, this was something that I was really, quote unquote, called to do. This is something that I was, quote unquote, had a gift to do. And now what do I do with that? How do I find that same space? I'll tell you that I get the same preacher goosebumps whenever I'm at training HR, right? Or training, because I feel the energy that comes through me, like, oh, wait a minute, this is a way to relate this to someone. And I get like that little spidey sense, like I just come up with a great way to explain this to this group of leaders or managers or whatever, that now I'm able to, and I feel that still, and I get that same energy and that spark, and I do crave it. It is like an addiction, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it when I get those. And my leader says often to me things like, I know this fills your bucket when you are delivering, or I know that, and it does, it fills my bucket. And so it's in a different space today, but it still is in my space, and I use it professionally at work, and it works well. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the same. I mean, I used to teach new employee orientation for IT, and even in IT, it was funny because I could always take these little, it was like, and even then I would be like, you know what, I think I need to say this. And I would say something, and, maybe it hit, maybe it didn't, maybe it would, whatever. But it's the same thing. You get into this rhythm and this groove, and, without the praise music and all that stuff, it's the same thing. You're saying something to somebody at some point. And sometimes it's good to watch people pick things up, and you can see it on their face, like they're like, oh,
yeah,
whether it's training, yeah, like, oh, I get it, I understand that, and sometimes it was just IT shit that I'm like,
yeah,
okay, how do I explain this to someone? Like, one of my favorite things to have done, and it's funny because it still sticks in my brain. There was this lady that worked at the hospital when I worked at the hospital. I don't know how old she was. She was old, and she could not figure out Word. She just could not figure it out.
It's not my best friend, but
No, I mean, like, she had a bunch of space. She had hit enter a lot, and she couldn't figure out what happened and all that stuff. And it was just, she could not figure it out. Well, having been in IT for a while, I went and figured it out in like 2 seconds. And I'm like, okay, she's completely technologically inept. There's no way she's gonna. This is just, How do I explain to her what's going on? Well, she's probably 70 years old. I'm like, typing. And so I explained to her, when you hit enter, you remember back in the day when you had to type and you got to the end of the line and you had to slap that thing to make it go to the next thing? And she was like, oh yeah, I remember those. I used to type on those all the time. Enter is when you slap the thing and it goes to the next line. If you slap that thing a bunch, it's going to run you down. So if you hit enter a bunch, it's going to run. And you see it on her face light up. Like she was like, oh, like something that you and I would probably just take for granted. That we just
happen.
Yeah, forever.
Word processing first.
Well, I had a word processor in college that essentially was, it wasn't a computer, but it kind of was, and so it's that kind of thing when you start talking to somebody and all of a sudden you just see their face light up like, oh, I get it. And it's something that you can tell they've been struggling with. That makes it even more apparent that she's or whomever it is has figured out whatever it is you're trying to explain. To me, that's one of the best things ever. It's to see that. I almost wonder if I shouldn't have went into teaching at some point to be, because there's something to be said about, probably 90% of the kids are going to just learn what they learn. But there's that one person or that one kid that you see it click. That's the funnest thing ever, especially for me, for IT stuff. You start talking about that stuff and it starts clicking, and then they're like, oh, that explains why this, and this. And then you can tell it explains a lot of questions. That one thing that you said that you didn't even probably think about. That's just, for me, it's just common knowledge, everyday thing that, I can take this server, move it to Plano up by Dallas through the internet while it's running, explain that to somebody and they were like, that's really cool stuff. That I can do that. But that's been around for 10 years at this point. It's not anything new, but to be able to explain it and them be like, that's really awesome, and then to show them how it works and then to teach them how it, and before long, they're all excited about IT shit. And then they're all along, it's the greatest thing ever. Soul Boon by Rainn Wilson, a.k.a. Dwight from The Office, the guy that everybody loves to hate. I really like him. Have you ever seen him talk about spirituality and stuff? No, he's really good. Like, it's really good stuff. Like, when I first started along this path, I had no clue. And so I got to figure it out. That's the non-spiritual part of me. And I came across him, and he's really good. There's one, he was doing an interview. I forget who it was with. It's a great interview. That's the reason why I wanted to get the book, is because, he was saying some of the same things that this path that I'm headed down, I was starting to think and believe and all that stuff. And it was really good. So as part of this kickoff with you, I figured we could start off with reading that. I'm not done with it. I'm only about halfway done, if that, maybe.
I'm about a third of the way done with the book. And, I have been tempted to go into his podcast because I see a lot.
Oh, I didn't know he had a podcast.
Yeah, he does. It's called the Soul Boon Podcast, actually, I believe. And I've been tempted to go into it, but I want to get through the book first so that I not only have a foundation for the podcast, but I did not want to mess up my interpretation of what book.
Yeah.
It's kind of like watching a movie about a book before you finish the book, right? So you don't want to kind of mess up your interpretation of what you want the book. You want the book to really be how it is intended as a piece of literature. So I'm about a third of the way through the book, and parts of it have been a little slow for me. My life has been a little hectic and crazy, so I've committed to try and finish it through January. So I'll have it done in the next couple of weeks. I definitely see I definitely see a lot of the spirituality talk. I will say, just from an outsider's point of view, just looking at it as a piece of literature, first couple of chapters were a little slow for me. And I think some of that goes to, and this is just absolute, just me and my style. Some of it is he starts talking about Star Trek and my brain just shuts down because I'm like, I can't. Like, I don't know the reference. I don't understand the reference. I've tried to watch Star Trek and I can't. So it just, the references, some of the references that he has that I think he believes will relate to a lot of people do not resonate with me. And it's kind of goes back to our background, right?
Yeah.
Like in the 80s when everybody was watching Star Trek, in the 70s, and I don't know how long they ran that, but during that time, you know, those references are lost with me. And it's only because I've never watched it. And then by the time I was 27 watching TV, it was not something I was like, I'm going to start this. Let me go watch the show from 78.
I think we tried to watch it as a family. We used to try to do family night on Sunday nights, and we'd watch Criminal Minds. We watched all of Criminal Minds, and so we tried to do the Star Treks, the old one, and I just can't do it. Like, I just can't. Like, I like the newer movies, but the older Star Treks, it's not my thing.
So that fell, that analogy that I think he believes will work for the general audience, and it does, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Especially in our age group, because most people our age, either their parents were watching it or it was around the house often. So that was part of pop culture that I just completely missed. So I feel like a lot of those analogies in the early part of the book were difficult for me to relate to. And so there were some parts of that I had to go back and reread, like, okay, look at it for what he's trying to say. And I can't relate to this character that he's referring to or this situation that was in Star Trek because of that. So some of those things fell short on me. And so, however, kind of like, eating Popeyes, right? So you eat the good stuff and spit out the bones. So I did start really appreciating some of the talks. He had a story in there about when his father had passed, and I really related well to that example. Him running through Target, right? Like feverishly trying to find the right bowl to be able to have this ritual that he needed to have with his father. I really related well to that. And again, not understanding the concept of his specific religion and belief system there, I still understood the frantic nature of where he was in that moment and how, how important that was to him and how that related. So that did relate to me better. And I believe that as I continue to read, some of the other pieces that he's bringing up are, some of the principles that he's talking about, like greed. And some, greed really hit home for me well because I have that. I really feel like that is an opportunity amongst society in general, and so that really stood out to me. And then some of the other principles that he brought up of, just where our society in general is today. Some of the concepts even around global warming and some of those things that he brought up related well to me. So as I continue to read the book, I do find some of those nuggets to be good. And I think what he's doing is laying a really solid foundation around like why there is this need for a spiritual revolution. And so that's about where I'm at in the book right now. So he's really laid like a solid foundation of this is why we need. And so I haven't got to the next piece, which I'm hoping is going to be part of that journey of that revolution.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned about the father passing away. That probably stuck out to me. My dad's still alive, but my mom passed, and so it's his take on some of it has to do with the ritual that he was performing too. You know, I mean, I think that's. Have you ever watched there's a couple of shows. It's a series. It's two. It's the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and what they do with their dead. You know, I mean, it's you know, in our upbringing, it would have been weird as shit, like even sort of creepy, like just. So I don't know how long they allow their dead to stay in the house. I mean, it's a long ass time. And
like 30 days? Or?
Yeah. I mean, it's like a fucking long time. Like they go through rituals upon rituals daily for weeks at a time. And the idea behind it is that they're preparing the soul of that individual for its next life. Whereas in Western cultures, you know,
we get into the more.
Oh, if they're not in the ground within a week, you're kind of weird. You know what I mean?
Well, it depends. I think that's interesting because it's different, even different cultures, even in America. So I have noticed that maybe if you, like I've noticed that my mother goes to a black church and their funerals are usually a couple of weeks out, like 3 or 4 weeks, right? After the person has passed. Whereas what I am more familiar with is probably the same week, maybe that weekend. So, or whatever we're trying to get it done. And so I've even noticed a difference in that. For various reasons.
Yeah. It's just, I think my mom passed on a Wednesday and she was, I think within a week she was buried. It was, yeah, I mean, she passed on a Saturday, and I think she was in the ground on Tuesday or Wednesday. So it was fast. But they pray over their dead. They, and by pray, I don't mean like what we think of praying. It is prayer, but it's not like what, I'm praying to Jesus or something. They pray over the dead. They prepare the body. They, and you see them, this is a movie or a video or a documentary, and you see them. I mean, the body is almost mummified. I mean, it's not, but it's, when the body gets like, it's starting to decay and it's starting to have, and they leave that body in the bed until it's time to go to the next location of that body. But their whole point is preparing that soul for its next life. And it's not a finality, it's not final death. It's in most cases in Western, it's, I was thinking about this and I'm all over the place right now, but, I was on YouTube. Joe Rogan came up on the shorts, and he had Mel Gibson, and this has evidently been recent. And he asked Mel Gibson what the difference between humans and animals are. And Mel Gibson said, we have souls. And I'm not, he's Catholic. I think that's what he is these days. I don't know what his religion is, but not to argue with him. But that phrase struck me because I no longer believe that we have a soul. I think we are a soul that has a body. And so I think that, and it's funny when you start looking at certain things and you just change slightly the way you look at it, it changes the way you view a lot of things. Because if I think that I'm a body that has a soul, then everything is predicated on this body. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I figured that when I die, my soul would look exactly like what I look like right now. Walking the streets of gold, gates of pearl, so on and so forth, which seems like the most boring fucking thing you could ever do for the rest of eternity. Whereas if I look at it as my soul has a body, then that means that my soul supersedes this conveyance of it. This is just the ability for my soul to experience this world as it needs to experience. Does that make sense? Sure. The slight change is great to me. It's I don't want to say life changing, but it's a change in the way you look at things. It's kind of like and this has nothing to do with this. I don't think this has anything to do with, some great aha moment. But someone was in my office the other day, and something happened, and I said, "Oh, it was aliens." And this person said, "Well, I think aliens are demons." And that's the thing that's going around. Alex Jones has started saying aliens are demons and stuff, and so that's kind of the thing that's going around. And I almost wanted to ask, but what if demons are aliens? Because it changes the whole conversation. It changes it from aliens are demons to, well, what if demons are aliens? Because demons are this supernatural thing, and you're saying that the alien is a supernatural thing. Well, if aliens exist, what if aliens merely appear as demons? So it's not some supernatural thing, it's an alien. It has nothing to do with anything except it's the way you view that thing. And it changes the way you interact with that thing. If I'm a soul that has a body as opposed to a body that has a soul, it changes the way I view my body. Suddenly my body and my existence here is no more important. It's important, but it's not as important as the experience that the soul has within the body through this conveyance of this instrument that it uses to experience the world.
So I kind of think about that, and I think about, many Eastern religions believe, that your soul carries on generation to generation or from one body to another body. And I think that relates well kind of to what you're saying, like your soul is always, right? And it may go from this being to that being, or it may go from, thought of something funny, I'll tell you in a second, but it may go from, this generation to another generation. It may live in a body today that will be maybe another body, maybe another gender, maybe another, culture, maybe another whatever at some point. And the question is that soul, how is it attached to the brain and the memories that live, within that soul? How does that work? And it's a very interesting study. And I don't think we'll ever know, right? There is no way to say definitively that either are correct. But, I laugh because I think about my friend. He has a dog, and actually she died. But the dog, we always said she's an old soul because every day when The Young and the Restless came on, she would want the TV turned out. And when the song, ding, 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 the song that comes on, she started howling like, "Roo!" And we could be at midnight and play the song on her phone, and she'd be singing along with it. And he gets excited and runs to the TV, right? So it's just like, it was a joke, like, yeah, she's an old grandma passed away loving The Young and the Restless, right? So, again, I don't know that it relates to what we're saying, but my point is that soul, perhaps, we don't know, could always exist. So the soul that is in you today could always exist and could have always existed. And that is kind of the thing that, where does your faith live with that? And where does your belief system live there? So.
Yeah. Well, I tend to believe that to be true. Can I prove it? No, I can't. It's not possible. But when you start looking at it as, I'll say this, and this is the reason why I probably believe it more than I don't, is because once I started believing that this body is the conveyance of a soul to experience the various aspects of the world in all of its forms. So if that's true, well, let me go back a little bit. So that's believing that suddenly allowed me to, and I've said it on here, had allowed me to just travel this journey without stress and anxiety and depression and all those things, because suddenly you realize probably I'm exactly where I need to be when I need to be. there is the question of, okay, so is there really such thing as free will versus non-free will? You know, I'm kind of on the fence with that.